methodology, no method. So we'll speak about Cartesian method, but I will just begin from the beginning. So first of all, there's perhaps you know that René Descartes was born in France, in the city which is now named after him, and well, in a noble family. So he was belonged to the French nobility, and he was born in 1596. And well, his Latin name is spelled as Cartesius in Latin, so Cartesius. So from this come the adjective Cartesian. Well, for example, Cartesian coordinate system, Cartesian, or Cartesian method, or Cartesian clarity, or Cartesian philosophy. So this Cartesian means belonging to Descartes, or philosophy of Descartes. So this is important. People sometimes, well, I found some students that had difficulties with sort of identifying Descartes and Cartesius, and so Cartesian as pertaining to Descartes. So that's just to be clear, because, you know, René Descartes himself was an apostle of clarity. So he said that he was sort of demanding from himself and from others clarity. So everything should be clear. If something is not clear, then please ask me the question and I will try to answer. Or we can together find an answer in the internet or somewhere in some sources. So everything should be clear. Well, as far as it is possible for us, of course. So, well, now he was born in 1596 and he received his education in a Jesuit school. This Jesuit college, college. Well, we have already spoken about Jesuits. Young Jesuits. We have spoken about this Catholic monastic order, or not? Just be careful. Yes, I think yes. And well, there were Jesuits also in India. For example, there was a Roberto Di Nobili, who was just considered even the master of Sanskrit language, and he spoke with Brahmins, and but he didn't make any conversions. But he just received. He was in friendly relations with educated Indians, so he received instruction in Indian, in Sanskrit, and he knew and maybe even translated something from the Vedas. Since that time, Jesuit presence was always there in India, but they were not proselytizing, but just studying Indian culture. So also in Portuguese colonies, in so-called Goa, maybe you know, Ojasvini, Goa. It was a Portuguese colony near Mumbai. Goa. When I was a young boy, it was still belonged to the Portuguese. There was like a city or port which on Indian territory, which belonged to the Portuguese. Now it is Indian city, Goa. It's famous for its Baroque churches and other monuments of Portuguese sort of influence there. Okay, it's clear or not? Because I want Cartesian clarity. So if you, well, the Jesuits were not only missionaries, they were also teaching in France itself. So they taught French children, especially sons of the nobility. This was not open for girls. This was only a school for boys. So Descartes was received his education there for 8 years. For Russians in India, they have some property there. They buy some property in Goa. Well, I don't know, yes, that, but I hope they are, well, they behave themselves decently there. Well, okay, because I have heard rumors that Russians abroad sometimes do not behave themselves very decently. I don't know. Well, maybe those Russians who are in Goa, they are modest. Well, this is also, of course, it's all a joke. Now, let's start with this Jesuit college. So what type of education did René Descartes receive there? It was fencing. Fencing, you know, fencing. Fencing, it's just, you understand, it's just a kind of sport, fencing. Also he received education in mathematics. Of course, there was religious instruction, and there were also humanities, Latin language, perhaps also Greek language, but mostly Latin, and study of classics of Latin literature. So he was, and because he was very able and had good memory, so after finishing this college, he came out of it an educated man, as if he studied in the university. Well, he also briefly sort of matriculated in the University of Poitiers. It's a French city, perhaps obscure. But here it seems that university education faded in comparison with that he received in this Jesuit college. Now, after finishing this college, as pertains to sons of the nobility, Descartes wanted to lead a sort of so-called fashionable life. So at that time, the aristocrats, they led kind of a, well, we can say fashionable life, or life in a so-called world of fashion, okay? So without any concrete occupation, but then he decided that he wants to see the world, okay? As he put it later, to read the book of this world, okay? So he wanted to travel. The easiest way to travel was to become an officer in a certain, or say mercenary in some army. So he entered a Dutch army. Dutch, you remember, we spoke about Dutch. Holland, at that time it was a powerful country, and even occupied, had some colonies. For example, Sri Lanka, now Ceylon, formerly Ceylon, and now Sri Lanka was once a Dutch colony also. So Dutch presence was everywhere. Even New York was called New Amsterdam before it was taken by the English in 1668. So Dutch Republic or Holland was very wealthy, and it could, but it had not much population, so it needed army, and so for money it sort of recruited mercenaries. Descartes was one of them. But then he changed his loyalty and became mercenary or conscripted in the army of Holy Roman Emperor because at that time, 1618, the 30 Years' War started. 30 Years' War. Well, perhaps if you don't know exactly European history, so it will be kind of a mystery. Now, what was this war about? But I will just tell you that this war was about religion mostly, and the belligerent parties in this war were Protestants and Catholics. So Descartes, being a Catholic, he took a Catholic side, and he took part in some military action in Bavaria, in Germany. Well, at that time it was independent state. And there in Bavaria, exactly on the night from 10th to 11th of November 1918 or 1618, 1618, he had three dreams. Three dreams. These are very important, and every solid biography, or we say scientifically made biography of Rene Descartes mentions these dreams. So what were these dreams? The first dream was that there was a whirlwind. Yes, you understand whirlwind? Like a storm, okay? Whirlwind. And he was carried by heavy wind into some chapel. And he recognized that it was the chapel of these Jesuits, so he remembered his school years, because Jesuits had, of course, a chapel where they prayed. So he was carried by this wind in the chapel. The second dream, well, Descartes thought that perhaps this was some action of the evil spirit. So he recited a prayer against evil spirits. Maybe the prayer he was taught by the Jesuits in the college. Again, he fell asleep, and he saw the second dream, that there was a thunderstorm and the lightning and a voice of thunder, or just, how to say, you know, thunder. It's when there is a lightning and thunder, and all after this strong, say, sound, all the room was filled by little sparks of light. This was the second dream. And the third dream was that there was a book put on the table, and he wanted to open this book, and he opened this book and read a phrase in Latin: Quod, vitae, sectabor, iter. Well, it's not easy perhaps to translate, but I will do it for you. But why do I also use these Latin citations? Because if you take it in double commas, these four words, and add Descartes, so you will find a very good biography of Rene Descartes, which is written and where all these dreams are very ably and with details described. So you can sort of confirm it independently that I'm not speaking nonsense, but just telling you, well, the existing story. Of course, we don't know from Descartes himself, but we know from the biographers and his contemporaries, and something is written by Rene Descartes himself in his notebooks. So this is this third dream. Well, what is the translation? Quod vitae sectabor iter means what way of life should I choose? Iter is way, sectabor it's I will choose or follow, and vita is life. So quod is what? What way of life should I choose? Okay. Well, iter, perhaps you know this word because you use the word iteration, for example. Well, sectabor, it's also, well, just here it's can be best translated as to choose. So what way of life should I choose? So after these three dreams, which were sort of produced great impression on Rene Descartes, he decided to quit the army and study philosophy. So he understood that his sort of vocation was to be a philosopher. Well, he just started to read books and even visited Holland in order to listen to some lectures in Leiden University or other universities of Dutch or other Dutch universities, and then he began to write books, and his first book appeared in French, but it was issued in Holland. It is called. It was published in 1637, and was called Discourse on the Method. On the method. That what interests us mostly. On the method. So that will interest us mostly, yes, because we are studying methodology of science. So what method did Rene Descartes suggest? So first of all, before starting some, I would say, inquiring about some question, according to Descartes, you should sort of put in doubt all that is already written or said about it. Okay, so universal doubt. This is the prerequisite. Doubt. So you should doubt everything in order just to sort of the place should be like nude or naked, without any. You remember idols of which Bacon spoke. So there should be no biases. Okay, bias. No biases. So you should be just free from all prejudices. Okay, you understand? Prejudice. All prejudices should be sort of discarded. So just take the matter as if anew, as if you are just starting from scratch, from the very beginning, from the foundation, and then proceed by means of very clear and understood in themselves, or like easily understood suppositions. So the suppositions from which you start should be very clear for you and for other people. They shouldn't be laden with, say, religious beliefs or traditions. They should be clear to everybody. Later, Descartes coined the phrase, "I wanted my philosophy to be understood even by the Turks." Well, why this discrimination? Why the Turks were sort of stupid people, or what did he mean? That he said, I made my philosophy so clear that it should be understood even by the Turks. No, that's not, he didn't doubt the intellect of the Turks. He doubted only their allegiance to Christianity, okay, because they were Muslims. I'm sorry. Allo received the news that one of the famous director of Pushkin Museum, Irina Antonova, died from COVID-19. Okay, so she was quite a celebrity in Moscow. You know, Pushkin Museum, where we keep treasures of art, European art, impressionists, and there are some paintings of Matisse. Well, it's situated near Metro Kropotkinskaya. If you know the geography of Moscow, so you can easily find it. It's an attraction for foreign tourists also, of course. Yes, that's life, you know, c'est la vie, as we say. She was 95, so she was quite elderly. I think she was born in the same year as the English Queen Elizabeth II, or maybe somewhere in 1925 or so. Well, so we should return to Descartes, to this Cartesian clarity, and the Turks. So the Turks were Muslims, so they didn't share, say, Christian revelation or Christian beliefs. Okay, so in order to be understood by the Turks, we shouldn't speak with them about Christianity, because they will not agree with us that, say, Jesus is a son of God, or there's a Holy Trinity, or we can call Mary, mother of Jesus, mother of God. This will all be objected by the Turks, or by Muslims, I think, in general. So if some of you are Muslims, you will certainly agree with that it's like how to say, well, there is a kind of a problem in relations between Christians and Muslims for a longer, for which, you know, still continues. So, but Descartes said, I don't want to create these problems. I want everybody understand me. Like the same is my method also. I have students, Hindu and Muslims and Christians of any denomination, or Protestants, Catholics, Orthodox. So there are, of course, atheists and agnostics. So I don't want to create some stumbling blocks, okay, for you. You know, stumbling block. So something like a hindrance. So this was the idea of Descartes. So not create any difficulties, but remain clear for all. So the best way to do that is to start from mathematics. Well, say from the idea of a square. The square has four angles which are equal with each other, and four sides which are also equal to each other. Okay, so this idea of a square is so easy and so clear that it can unite everybody. Okay, so all our ideas should be like that. And so our method should consist in starting from clear ideas. Then we should make some conclusions. Or, for example, that the diagonals of the square are equal with each other. Okay, this is not so evident, but it is easily proved. Okay, well, now what is that? We can ask. Is it Euclid again? But Euclid was already wrote his geometry almost 2000 years ago. I mean, if we compare the 17th century, in which the date of this book and the date when the elements of Euclid appeared in the 4th century before Christ. So what's new then? So should we start studying geometry again? No. According to Descartes, we should start from mathematics, then sort of come to physics, medicine, psychology, and cosmology, and everywhere we should introduce these clear ideas. Well, I've told you already when we were finishing the lecture on Galileo how Descartes just argued about the position of our sun. Sort of, he was not happy with the Copernican idea that our sun is in the center of the world. Well, not only because this was condemned by the Catholic Church, but it seemed to him also illogical and unreasonable. So he started with this, well, it is not in the book Discourse on the Method, it is in his later book, Principles of Philosophy, but there it is, I use it like an illustration of the Cartesian method. So he says, well, let's look at our sun from some distant star. What should we see? We'll see a small insignificant star. We will not see our sun as bright as we see it from the earth. We will see it as only a little star. So now, what is the use of putting one little star in the center of other stars? Okay, so this doesn't seem reasonable. And I think everybody can agree, and I hope you also agree with Rene Descartes that it is really unreasonable. So the system of Copernicus should be discarded because Copernicus put the sun in the center of the world. So there was a sphere of where all the fixed stars are situated, and in the center of this sphere there is situated the sun. Well, for Descartes, now it seemed not so clear idea. It seemed biased, and some kind of sun as a source of light. So it should be a source of light for all the universe, but it doesn't follow. It's only for us, sun is important. For perhaps some inhabitants of other planets in our galaxy, if there are any. So for them, their own star, say Sirius or some other, will be important, okay? And not our sun. Our sun will, they will not even maybe notice it, okay? So here is again the move away from our solar system to the direction of this idea, which was later developed by Einstein, the idea of relativity of the systems of reference, okay? So, well, this is an example how to start from, say, a very simple proposition and reach perhaps non-trivial conclusions, okay? Even discard some, well, I would say, well, systems which have some reputation. You can compare the position of the Copernican system with the position of Galileo and Bruno. You know, Giordano Bruno, perhaps a famous Italian philosopher. Well, who was burned at the stake by the Inquisition, Giordano Bruno in 100 and in the year 1600, Bruno. Well, for Giordano Bruno, for Johann Kepler, for Galileo, Copernican system was the truth. And Descartes said, no, Copernican system, this sun in the center of the world, is not true. It's just, well, for example, Kepler, he argued in this way: sun is God the Father. Stars are God the Son, and the sphere of stars is God the Son, and intermedium space is God the Holy Ghost. You see, so Kepler started from the concept of Trinity. Of course, if you are Muslim, or atheist, these arguments of Kepler will be void, okay, for you, because why should the image of the Trinity be somehow imprinted in this way in the system of the world, okay? But for Kepler, it was very important. And if you read his work, Mysterium Cosmographicum, you will see that he followed this logic, okay? Oh, you can see also some article, learned article about Johannes Kepler. And well, Kepler is a good astronomer, and he's the author of these 3 laws of Kepler. So we have nothing against Kepler, but Kepler was a poor philosopher, a poor methodologist in comparison with Rene Descartes. He couldn't understand that you should start with premises that are sort of valid for everyone, not only for Christians who believe in the Trinity, okay? From these premises, because Kepler somehow identified Son with God the Father, so God the Father is like the principle of the Trinity. So Son is some special, and this position of the Sun in the center of the world is special. For Descartes, it was just an insignificant star. So Descartes discarded Copernican system in its core. This means that the sun is in the center of the world, and it's like a lantern which is put by the creator to illuminate the whole universe. Now Descartes says, well, this will not hold, okay? I suggest another variant. Well, this is how he worked in say in cosmology. Now we turn to psychology. So in which way did Descartes regard the human, the human mind and the human body? Who is the important, the body or mind? Well, Descartes argued in this way: who commands? Who is the ruler? Okay. Well, this is the same question with which Socrates put and Plato continued. The idea that our mind is like a charioteer that sort of rules the charioteer, who, you know, charioteer, and the chariot, it's like a a keep run by horses, okay? So who govern the horses, okay? Our intellect. And who are horses? They are emotions, 2 types of emotions. So who is the leader? Who is the chief? Intellect. But how can intellect command emotions and body? Body is material, so it cannot command itself. So it's need a commander, but the commander is, if it is also part of the body, then it would follow that the body sort of is an automate, and it commands itself. But now we can say, but who sort of, for example, I'm doing the lecture, I select the words. Well, who is just the boss here, okay? Just my brain. But how my brain, which consists of protons, neutrons, and electrons, how can it understand what is what to speak to my students. These protons, they lack intellect. So where does this intellect come from? Can it come from inanimate matter? It seems not really plausible. So it seems quite artificial. So it's better and more clear to introduce immaterial principle, immaterial governing principle, which is the soul. Okay, so my soul commands my brain, and my brain is only a holder of the information, or like a computer. Well, I command my computer. I write in chat some words. It's I'm writing, computer is just obeying me. So the same with brain. I ask the brain to please remember this, how this word is translated into English, because I think in Russian, okay? So I'm just finding exact English words. And my brain obeys me and obediently seeks these words. So I can continue my lecture, okay? But I am the boss. The brain is also only my servant. So now follows the most difficult part, how this brain-mind interaction sort of is fulfilled. And here, of course, is a stumbling block for Descartes, this mind-body interaction, because mind is spiritual and brain is material. So how can spirit influence matter? So we have introduced another idea, the idea of God, who somehow makes the balance or harmonizes my spirit with my body, okay? So without God, there could be no action of my mind on my body, okay? So we started from very clear premises, but the like result is not so clear. And perhaps most of you will doubt the existence of a soul and the existence of God even. So you see, so Descartes promised clarity, but created kind of a confusion. That's a deficiency here. Now we'll start another conference, Ojaswini. Yes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, the same link. Okay.
Yes, sir. I'll open the same link.
Very good. Thank you. So now we have, you see, we started from this discourse on the method, and now we are illustrating this this work by this book of Descartes by using his other books, which are Passions of the Soul, and Meditations on First Philosophy. So, well, I would say that Meditations on the First Philosophy. Well, everywhere Descartes follows the same method on the first philosophy. Everywhere Descartes follows the same method. So, well, in his Passions of the Soul, he wants to understand how this mind or soul interacts with the brain and ultimately with our passions. Well, and he suggests that this interaction is done via like little brain. Well, this is a part of our brain. Well, little brain it's called. Well, you can see it in the Wikipedia. I don't know exactly the English term for that. Well, And in the Meditations on the First Philosophy, Descartes argues the existence of this immaterial principle, which is the soul. Even in this book was written in Latin, not in French. And this first edition of this book was published in Paris in 1641. And in this edition had a subtitle. Was just exactly translated in this way: Meditations on the First Philosophy, in which I will be proved the existence of God and the immortality of the soul. So this is a great objective, to prove the immortality of the soul. But when Descartes published the second edition of this book, it bore a more modest subtitle: Meditations on the First Philosophy, in which it is proved the existence of God and the difference of mind from body. So you see, no question of the immortality of the soul, but more modest proposal that mind and body are different. Mind is spiritual, or Descartes in Latin uses this word res cogitans, which is can be translated from Latin as thing that thinks. You see, that thinks, or a thinking thing. It's just like a play of words, yes? Thinking thing, okay? Or, well, and a body is res extensa, or thing with dimensions, okay? Or spread in space. With, I can say, with dimensions, so, well, extended, okay? Well, better use this English word, extended thing, okay? Extended, so somehow occupying space, okay? So body is characterized by its sort of its quality of occupying space, and soul is defined as a thing that thinks. Or okay, so how I would already told you in the first half of our lecture that there's a big problem how these two things can interact with each other. So in the Meditations on the First Philosophy, Descartes solves this puzzle by adding God, who is now important as helping man to govern his own body. So God is like an intermediate actor who can help me to guide my own body. Okay, so without God, I cannot do anything. I cannot read a lecture because God always helps me. Not, you know, should not be understood mystically that, as we say, the religious people say, God help me, okay, you know. All Muslims also can use this prayer. I think it is also can be translated in Arabic, God help me, okay, help me God. Well, and of course Christians also use this prayer, and maybe Indians also, if they ask a particular god, say Shiva or Krishna, they can say, or they just say Hare Krishna, okay. So, well, but that's the same, more or less. They invoke. So now it is not in this way that I invoke God to help me by special help or special protection to deliver a lecture. No, just I can even forget about God and about religion, and even can be an atheist, but still, according to Descartes, God acts within me, even if I'm an atheist. So, but God sustains all this order of things, and especially he gives this connection between mind and body, which is important for, well, indispensable, I would say, for everyone. Okay, so of course this is a very far-reaching thought. Okay, so Descartes thought that perhaps his proofs of this action of God in the soul will and body will make all people I would say religious in a kind of a sense, okay, or just pious, you understand? Well, you understand this pious. This means that, well, showing reference to some sacred things, pious. You understand? Ogesvini, do you know this adjective, pious?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is a person which displays some religious feelings, okay? So Descartes thought that his philosophy will promote religion. And that's why his book was published with the consent of censorship, which at that time in Paris was very strict. So his book underwent this censorship and was pronounced that it could be published, that the theologians have nothing against it, okay? But then after Descartes died, this book was put into the index of prohibited book. Why? So the church changed its opinion. Why? What happened? Descartes already died. What was the problem with Descartes? He meant well, but somehow his books, and this one also, Meditations on the First Philosophy, was put by the Catholic Church in the index of prohibited books. For what? The problem is that extension is the most characteristic thing of matter. So matter should be extended. But according to the teaching of the Catholic Church, there's a certain event during the Holy Mass, which is called transubstantiation. Transubstantiation is the change, miraculous change of bread and wine into body and blood of Christ. It's called also the sacrament of Eucharist. Well, it's I think it's subtleties of Christian catechism, but without them you cannot understand the position of the church vis-a-vis Descartes. So why the church was not happy with the Cartesian philosophy? Because it seemed to church theologians that he undermined or believed in the presence of so-called Eucharistic presence or presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. It was very important at that time for Catholics, and it was denied by Protestants. So in the polemics between Catholics and Protestants, Catholics defended this real presence, it's called real presence. Well, all these, if you have difficulties, you can, of course, Google all these things and you will find corresponding articles on all these things. If you want just to just get a more deep understanding of what was that created tensions between Cartesian philosophy and the Catholic Church. but it was not understood from the very beginning. So when Christina to Sweden to teach her philosophy, he went there in 1649 to Sweden, to Stockholm. And at that time, Christina, you understand, Christina was a Swedish queen. We don't have many women now in our course, not because I am a male chauvinist, but just because all the traditional courses of philosophy are built in this way as to minimize the importance of women, okay? This is a bias, not mine, but this is a kind of a tradition which I cannot just overthrow in one moment. But I'm trying to do whatever possible to highlight the important women in the history of philosophy. And I think Christina, the Queen of Sweden, is one of them. So she was very learned and very talented girl. She was at that time, I think, 19 or 18, but she was already displaying great interest in philosophy, which I want you also to display, if it is possible, and imitate Christina in this respect. Well, of course, I'm no Descartes, but, you know, in proportion, okay? You are also not queens. I mean, I don't know. Well, I just am joking, okay? But Christina was a really very, I would say, of where? Of Sweden. At that time, well, now you can say we have in Sweden, we still have monarchs. Well, they sort of reign but not rule, okay? They, as they say of Queen Elizabeth II, that they don't meddle into political affairs, these kings or queens of Sweden. Well, but at that time, the situation was different. The kings and the queens of Sweden really were powerful political figures, and many things dependent from them. So Christina, and she, well, invited Descartes to teach her philosophy. So Descartes went to Stockholm, and then he got a bad cough or pneumonia and died in February 1650. Well, in February. But before he died, he went to communion and to confession on the feast on the 2nd of February. Well, I think my friends from Nigeria know about that feast. February, it's the feast of presentation in the Catholic Church. Feast of presentation of Jesus into the temple. Feast of presentation. Usually they light and sanctify, bless candles on that day. So it's called also candle mass, presentation. Well, so on that day, while in Stockholm, Descartes visited a little Catholic chapel in French embassy. You know, the difficulty was that Sweden was officially a Protestant country, so there were no Catholic churches there. But there were two so-called chaplainships because there were two chaplains. One was the chaplain of the Portuguese embassy, and one was the chaplain of the French embassy. So within the French embassy and within the Portuguese embassy, there were little chapels and there were priests. So it was part of international relations, you understand. So Descartes visited this chapel in the French embassy and went to confession and communion. And I think 9 days after he died, I think it was on the 11th of February, but you can just correct me if I'm not mistaken, February. And before dying, he again asked a priest for so-called last rites or viaticum. And he gave him, of course, this viaticum, the last rites and absolution. So Descartes was no heretic, was never accused of heresy like Galileo. You know that Galileo was vehemently suspected of heresy, officially by the Pope himself, by the Inquisition. With Descartes, there were no such difficulties. So he was completely free of any accusations or suspicions of heresy. So he died a good Catholic in good standing. But after his death, there followed this discussion of whether Cartesian philosophy is compatible with the Catholic teaching on Eucharist. And that's why his books, some of his books were put in the index, on the index, they say, of prohibited books, okay? This is the, how it, Descartes started well, but he could not, the situation was so tense in Europe that he could not sort of satisfy all the belligerent sides, okay? So Catholics were not satisfied and Protestants also were not satisfied. Protestants perhaps less, because for Protestants, because they did not believe in the Eucharist, in the real presence, so for them it was not a matter of great concern. So that didn't, I don't, also for, but for atheists, perhaps the stumbling block was this postulation of the existence of God, and Descartes' insistence that God not only exists, but is playing a very crucial role in functioning of the human organism, okay? So that perhaps seems quite, I would say, stunning and unwelcome in Cartesian philosophy for the atheists, okay? Well, the agnostics, well, they can say, well, we don't know, perhaps there is something, and there, in the 20th century already, there was a great discussion between Karl Popper and John Eccles. Well, both John Eccles is a Nobel laureate of in medicine for his study of the brain, but he was defending the Cartesian dualism, that existence of this center of coordination which is immaterial. So because he couldn't explain, as he said, brain from actioning as a automatically, okay, or reflectory, in a reflective way, just there should be some center of activity which explains the purposeful activity of humans, okay. Karl Popper was an agnostic, so he was trying to sort of argue with Eccles, but they were friends because Karl Popper spent some years in New Zealand and Eccles was from Australia, so they were friends since the Second World War, and so they together wrote a book. I think it is The Self and Its Brain. So you can see this book. So this is called Neo-Cartesianism, the self and its brain. Well, Popper didn't want to call it the soul, but he called this mental activity world two, so distinct from world one. What is world two? World two, according to Karl Popper, is the world of our consciousness, okay? So he didn't call it as the soul, as John Eccles does it. So you see that neurophysiologists still think that Cartesian idea is not outdated. So if you look John Eccles, then you will see that these ideas are quite popular. I can name other physiologists like Sherrington or Penfield, but this is not so important now because we speak about René Descartes. Well, perhaps it's also important because it's kind of sort of highlights the influence of René Descartes on, say, even contemporary neurophysiology. So Descartes is still a powerful figure and a powerful philosopher. Also, logicians or philosophers, or they continue to discuss the validity of so-called ontological proof of the existence of God, which Descartes formulates in his Meditations on the First Philosophy. Well, it resembles to a certain extent the ontological proof of Anselm of Canterbury, of which we spoke when we discussed the Middle Ages. Yes, Anselm. Did you forget this name or still remember it? Because people are sometimes forgetting things. Canterbury. It seems that I spoke about him, or Jesuit. Yes? Is the name familiar for you?
Yes, sir.
Anselm, yes? We spoke
Yes, sir.
about
Categories. Yes, sir.
ontological argument, yes? Well,
Yes, sir.
I just remind you, maybe some people were absent, that ontological argument consists in this way of arguing that God is perfect, the most perfect being. But if God existed only in our imagination, it would not be so perfect, because real God is more perfect than imaginary God. So God, in order to be most perfect, should exist, okay? Well, more or less the same line of thought was displayed by René Descartes. So for René Descartes, idea of God is the most clear idea that enters the human brain, okay, human mind, sort of. And so because this idea is clear, so it should exist. Like the idea of a square is clear, so squares should exist. But you know, there's a difference. Well, square is a mathematical object. So it seems that God is also kind of a mathematical object. And so how can this mathematical object act on physical entities, okay? So this was a kind of a, well, I would say difficulty here. Still, somehow Descartes managed, and he was a good logician, so somehow he managed to put the ends together in his philosophy, but for his followers, we'll speak perhaps next lecture will be devoted to Benedict Spinoza, and for his contemporaries like Blaise Pascal, that didn't seem plausible, didn't seem very convincing. Blaise Pascal. Pascal. You know Pascal because you know the language Pascal and the units of pressure named after Pascal. So Blaise Pascal, who was lived also in France in the 17th century, and of course knew very well the philosophy of René Descartes, he didn't like it. And because he was a convinced Christian, and he said that God of Descartes, well, is like a prime mover, and you can even doubt if you can pray to him, and he will just listen to your prayers. So it's kind of an architect of the universe. So Blaise Pascal later formulated his idea that his God is God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God of the Bible, and not God of the philosophers and scientists, okay? Well, we'll speak about Blaise Pascal separately. So I just want here to stress that Blaise Pascal wasn't happy with the philosophy of Descartes. And another philosopher who was very happy with the philosophy of Descartes, but changed it in some way, is Benedict Spinoza, also a famous philosopher, Dutch philosopher, Jewish by nationality, who lived in the 17th century. So he sort of embraced the Cartesian principles, but imperceptibly changed some of them. So out of Cartesian dualism, there appeared monism or pantheism. So God and the world were regarded as one thing, okay? So Spinoza didn't deny God. He said, well, God is most perfect being, okay? God exists, okay? But what is the difference between God and the world? Maybe all the world can we call God, okay? Because God is a causa sui, or substance that is the cause of itself. But, well, if we regard this kind of a substance, we can imagine that there exists only one substance. And so there is no difference between God and the created world, okay? So, of course, this scenario is possible, logically possible. But of course, its implications are contrary to Christianity and even to Judaism. That's why Benedict Spinoza was expelled or excommunicated from the synagogue. Well, this is also an example of an influence of Descartes on his contemporaries. Of course, the influence of Descartes continued throughout the history of European philosophy. He influenced, for example, English philosopher John Locke. John Locke, also 17th century, younger than Descartes, and he influenced Gottfried Leibniz, first of all. Gottfried Leibniz. Well, you know also the name of Leibniz because you all studied, I think, calculus, yes? So you know this Leibniz sums, or, well, his contribution to mathematics, okay? Well, that's how I got acquainted with Leibniz. I mean, when I studied calculus, I remember they called it sums of Leibniz, yes? Sums of Leibniz. Maybe you also know about that. Or if you don't, or have forgotten, then you can easily Google them, okay? Very well, so Leibniz, Locke, Spinoza, Pascal, so everybody paid attention to Rene Descartes. So Rene Descartes was not forgotten. He was at the core of post-Cartesian, we can say, European thinking. So he was a real revolutionary in philosophy, okay? You understand, yes? So he created a revolution in philosophy. That's how he was regarded by German historian of philosophy, Schelling, in the beginning of the 19th century. So Schelling, Friedrich, I think, Schelling, in his history of philosophy, lectures on the history of philosophy, he calls Descartes a revolutionary. Friedrich, I think Friedrich. Well, if I'm mistaken, then I think he has many names. So Schelling, this is a famous German philosopher. We'll of course come upon him. Maybe if we'll continue our course in the second semester. I don't know, Ojaswini, you have only this semester of philosophy or next semester also?
Sir, it's showing next semester also online.
Next semester.
Yeah.
So we'll resume our classes in February.
Yeah, maybe, sir, most probably.
Okay, but the For example, I have the so-called Harbor Space Group. They will finish it now, their philosophy. For example, Jovan Velanac, okay? So for those who are in harbor space, this will end. So I'm sorry that I cannot introduce them into the mysteries of Schelling's philosophy. But for you, I promise that we'll cover Schelling somewhere in March or February, okay? But not this semester. So Schelling, of course, he had original philosophy of his own, but he also gave lectures on history of European philosophy, and he praised very much Descartes as a father of, say, new European philosophy, the philosophy of the so-called new times. Well, the same with Hegel. Hegel also, but he started new times not with Descartes, but with Martin Luther. Martin Luther, who is the reformer of the church. So according to Hegel, Martin Luther, by his reform, started the new age. So the new age or the new time started with 1517, okay, with the Reformation. With Friedrich Schelling, it started with Rene Descartes. So Cartesian philosophy was the break with scholasticism, because you remember that Francis Bacon, although a Protestant and studying in Protestant England, was taught nevertheless scholastic philosophy in Cambridge University. So scholasticism was not sort of conquered. It still remained in the universities as a system, as philosophical system. So only Descartes sort of gave the death blow to scholastic philosophy, okay? So this is an accepted opinion, and it was formulated by Schelling, okay, and Hegel. How the exams? Well, we will, I think for harbor space, the exams will be separately treated, and I already written to my students of harbor space that they will have it in December. But as for others, we'll have an exam or zachot, I don't know, in February. In January. So I have not yet discussed the date with Maria, but we will speak with Masha Kaplan, okay? So we'll speak with her about the exact date, but that will be in January. So we'll organize Zoom conference, one or maybe two, or what is needed, because there's a lot of you, 26, well, 25, me excluded. So, but more than 20, surely, yes? So I have to listen to everybody. So now I can only tell you how the exam will pass. You will prepare a presentation on a philosopher that you like most. Or it can be, say, Arabic philosopher, if you prefer, or Indian philosopher, not certainly not obligatory European. And I will listen to your presentation. Perhaps you will show me some slides. I don't know. So this will last for, say, 5 or 7 minutes, and I think that will be enough. And then I will put your mark. So you shouldn't study all these philosophers that we are speaking about. Just choose the topic and prepare a presentation. Is it clear?
Professor, I have a question. So can we choose, for example, a poet? For example, a specific poet from some region where we are living. Like, for example, if
yes, of course, if you are
Pushkin or
yes, if you are from Iran, yes, you can speak about Iranian philosopher. Okay, if you are from say, Syria or Egypt, you can speak about Arabic philosophy. If it's more close to your region. If you are Indian, you can speak about Indian philosophers, maybe about Mahatma Gandhi, for example. I don't know. I'm not an expert in Indian philosophy. I know that Vedas, Indian Vedas, are very philosophically laden books, like Upanishads. I don't know how to turn Upanishadi in Russian, we say. Jaswini, perhaps you understand what I mean.
Yeah, they're called Upanishads.
Yes, yes. So this very philosophical book, and it exerted an influence on many European philosophers like Hegel and Schopenhauer. So, well, you can also choose any topic, but we are not saying goodbye to each other. We'll meet next Tuesday, I think. So I think that we'll continue these discussions.
Yeah,
and,
hi,
we
Professor.
can
I have
also
question.
resume them. Yes, yes, please, Hamza.
Yeah,
Yes.
I want to discuss. Basically, I am from Pakistan. Can I discuss about my country, about my country poet?
Yes, yes, you have a great Pakistani philosopher. I forgot his name, but he studied in England and he was quite prominent. But maybe others. There are many Pakistani philosophers, prominent ones.
Yeah,
So
yeah. One of the most
that.
in Pakistan, the poet name is Lama Iqbal. Can I describe on it?
Yes, yes, you can. Yes, it will be very, very good. Now, please,
because I really like it.
there's less than 1 minute. Yes, so please continue discussion in chat, in WhatsApp or elsewhere. So I want just to thank Ojaswini for hosting us and hope you enjoyed the lecture, okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I will discuss
okay.
to you.
Yes, very good.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Goodbye.